The trial of Socrates is the most interesting suicide the world has ever seen. Had he wanted to, Socrates could have won an acquittal. The closeness of the vote shows that there was nothing inevitable about his sentence. If he had been less condescending, less confrontational, less arrogant. If he had argued he was just exercising his basic right of free speech, a right of which Athenians were justly proud, jurors might have been more receptive. But Socrates couldn't bring himself to rely on a principle he so often had criticized. He was uncompromising. He showed no hint of respect for Athens or her institutions in his defense. For Socrates, being a good person came first. Being a good citizen was a poor second. As a matter of personal integrity, he made Athenians choose between their love of freedom and their love of community, and in the end, they chose community. Socrates knew how to die. The manner in which he chose to die enhanced his reputation among his associates and made him the first great martyr for the cause of free speech, a sort of secular saint. Here I present to you the trial of Socrates and his arguments to the court. Socrates. How you have felt, O men of Athens, at hearing the speeches of my accusers I cannot tell, but I know that their persuasive words almost made me forget who I was. Such was the effect of them, and yet they have hardly spoken a word of truth. But many as their falsehoods were, there was one of them which quite amazed me. I mean when they told you to be upon your guard, and not to let yourselves be deceived by the force of my eloquence. They ought to have been ashamed of saying this, because they were sure to be detected as soon as I opened my lips and displayed my deficiency. They certainly did appear to be most shameless in saying this, unless by the force of eloquence they mean the force of truth. For then I do indeed admit that I am eloquent, but in how different a way from theirs. Well, as I was saying, they have hardly uttered a word, or not more than a word, of truth. But you shall hear from me the whole truth, not, however, delivered after their manner, in a set oration duly ornamented with words and phrases. No, indeed. But I shall use the words and arguments which occur to me at the moment, for I am certain that this is right, and that at my time of life I ought not to be appearing before you, O men of Athens, in the character of a juvenile orator. Let no one expect this of me. And I must beg of you to grant me one favour, which is this. If you hear me using the same words in my defence which I have been in the habit of using, and which most of you may have heard in the agora, and at the tables of the money changers or anywhere else, I would ask you not to be surprised at this, and not to interrupt me. For I am more than 70 years of age, and this is the first time that I have ever appeared in a court of law, and I am quite a stranger to the ways of the place, and therefore I would have you regard me as if I were really a stranger, whom you would excuse if he spoke in his native tongue, and after the fashion of his country, that I think is not an unfair request. Never mind the manner, which may or may not be good, but think only of the justice of my cause and give heed to that. Let the jury decide with their virtue, and the speaker speak truly. And first, it's only right that I reply to the older charges and to my first accusers, and then I will go to the later ones. For I have had many accusers who accused me of old, and their false charges have continued during many years, and I am more afraid of them than of Anytus and his associates, who are dangerous too in their own way. But far more dangerous are these, who began when you were children, and took possession of your minds with their falsehoods, telling of one Socrates, a wise man, who speculated about the sky above, and searched into the earth beneath, and made the worse appear the better cause. These are the accusers whom I dread, for they are the circulators of this rumour, and their hearers are too apt to fancy that speculators of this sort do not believe in the gods. And they are many, and their charges against me are of ancient date, and they made them in days when you were impressible, in childhood, or perhaps in youth, and the cause when heard went by default, for there was none to answer. And hardest of all, their names I do not know and cannot tell, unless in the chance of a comic poet. But the main body of these slanderers, who from envy and malice have wrought upon you, and there are some of them who are convinced themselves, and impart their convictions to others, all these, I say, are most difficult to deal with, for I cannot have them up here and examine them, and therefore I must simply fight with shadows in my own defence, and examine when there is no one who answers. I will ask you then to assume with me, as I was saying, that my opponents are of two kinds, one recent, the other ancient, And I hope that you will see the propriety of my answering the latter first, for these accusations you heard long before the others, and much oftener. Well then, I will make my defence, and I will endeavour in the short time which is allowed to do away with this evil opinion of me, which you have held for such a long time. And I hope I may succeed, if this be well for you and me, and that my words may find favour with you. But I know that to accomplish this is not easy. I quite see the nature of the task. Let the event be as the God wills. In obedience to the law, I make my defence. I will begin at the beginning, and ask what the accusation is, which has given rise to this slander of me, and which has encouraged Meletus to proceed against me. What do the slanderers say? They shall be my prosecutors, and I will sum up their words in an affidavit. Socrates does nothing that is just. He is a curious person, who searches into things under the earth and in the sky, and he makes the worse appear the better cause, and he teaches the aforesaid doctrines to others. That is the nature of the accusation, and that is what you have seen yourselves in the comedy of Aristophanes, who has introduced a man whom he calls Socrates, going about and saying that he can walk in the air, and talking a deal of nonsense concerning matters of which I do not pretend to know either much or little, not that I mean to say anything disparaging of anyone who is wise about natural philosophy. I should be very sorry if Meletus could lay that to my charge. But the simple truth is, O Athenians, that I have nothing to do with these studies. Very many of those here present are witnesses to the truth of this, and to them I appeal. Speak then, you who have heard me, and tell your neighbours whether any of you have ever known me. Hold forth in few words or in many upon matters of this sort. You hear their answer, and from what they say of this, you will be able to judge of the truth of the rest. As little foundation is there for the report that I am a teacher, and take money, that is no more true than the other. Although, if a man is able to teach, I honour him for being paid. There is Gorgias of Leontini, and Prodicus of Chios, and Hippias of Elis, who go the round of the cities and are able to persuade the young men to leave their own citizens, by whom they might be taught for nothing, and come to them, whom they not only pay, but are thankful if they may be allowed to pay them. There is actually a Parian wise man residing in Athens, of whom I have heard, and I came to hear of him in this way. I met a man who has spent a world of money on the sophists, Callias the son of Hipponikos, and knowing that he had sons, I asked him, Callias, I said, if your 2 sons were foals or calves, there would be no difficulty in finding someone to put over them. We should hire a trainer of horses or a farmer, probably, who would improve and perfect them in their own proper virtue and excellence. But as they are human beings, whom are you thinking of placing over them? Is there anyone who understands human and political virtue? You must have thought about this as you have sons. Is there anyone? There is, he said. Who is he? Said I. And of what country? And what does he charge? Evenus the Parian, he replied. He is the man, and his charge is 5 coins. Happy is Evenus, I said to myself, if he truly has this knack, and teaches at such a modest charge. Had I the same, I should have been very proud and conceited. But the truth is that I have no knowledge of the kind. I dare say, Athenians, that someone among you will reply, why is this, Socrates? And what is the origin of these accusations of you? For there must have been something strange which you have been doing. All this great fame and talk about you would never have arisen if you had been like other men. Tell us then why this is, as we should be sorry to judge hastily of you. Now I regard this as a fair challenge, and I will endeavour to explain to you the origin of my name and of this evil fame. Please to attend then, and although some of you may think I am joking, I declare that I will tell you the entire truth. Men of Athens, this reputation of mine has come of a certain sort of wisdom which I possess. If you ask me what kind of wisdom, I reply, such wisdom as is attainable by man, for to that extent I am inclined to believe that I am wise. Whereas the persons of whom I was speaking have a superhuman wisdom, which I may fail to describe because I have it not myself. And he who says that I have speaks falsely and is taking away my character. And here, O men of Athens, I must beg you not to interrupt me, even if I seem to say something extravagant. For the word which I will speak is not mine. I will refer you to a witness who is worthy of credit, and will tell you about my wisdom, whether I have any, and of what sort. And that witness shall be the god of Delphi. You must have known Xenophon. He was early a friend of mine and also a friend of yours, for he shared in the exile of the people and returned with you. Well, Xenophon, as you know, was very impetuous in all his doings, and he went to Delphi and boldly asked the oracle to tell him whether, as I was saying, I must beg you not to interrupt, he asked the oracle to tell him whether there was anyone wiser than I, and the Pythian prophetess answered that there was no man wiser. Xenophon is dead himself, but his brother, who is in court, will confirm the truth of this story. Why do I mention this? Because I am going to explain to you why I have such an evil name. When I heard the answer, I said to myself, what can the god mean? And what is the interpretation of this riddle? For I know that I have no wisdom, small or great. What can he mean when he says that I am the wisest of men? And yet he is a god and cannot lie. That would be against his nature. After a long consideration, I at last thought of a method of trying the question. I reflected that if I could only find a man more sophos than myself, then I might go to the god with a refutation of the oracle in my hand. I should say to him, here is a man who is more sophos than I am, but you said that I was the most sophos. Accordingly, I went to one who had the reputation of being wise and observed to him. His name I need not mention. He was a politician whom I selected for examination, and the result was as follows. When I began to talk with him, I could not help thinking that he was not really sophos, although he was thought sophos by many, and more sophos still by himself. And I went and tried to explain to him that he thought himself sophos, but was not really sophos, and the consequence was that he hated me, and his enmity was shared by several who were present and heard me. So I left him, saying to myself as I went away, well, although I do not suppose that either of us knows anything really beautiful and good, I am better off than he is, for he knows nothing, and thinks that he knows. I neither know nor think that I know. In this latter particular, then, I seem to be slightly more sophos than him. Then I went to another, who had still higher philosophical pretensions, and my conclusion was exactly the same. I made another enemy of him, and of many others besides him. After this, I went to one man after another, being not unconscious of the enmity which I provoked, and I lamented and feared this, but necessity was laid upon me. The word of the god, I thought, ought to be considered first. And I said to myself, go I must to all who appear to know and find out the meaning of the oracle. And I swear to you, Athenians, by the dog I swear, for I must tell you the truth, the result of my mission was just this. I found that the men most in repute were all but the most foolish, and that some inferior men were really wiser and better. I must perform for you the tale of my wandering, just as if I had been labouring to achieve labours that I endured for this purpose, that the oracular wording should become impossible to refute. When I left the politicians, I went to the poets, tragic, dithyrambic, and all sorts. And there I said to myself, you will be detected. Now you will find out that you are more ignorant than they are. Accordingly, I took them some of the most elaborate passages in their own writings, and asked what was the meaning of them, thinking that they would teach me something. Will you believe me? I am almost ashamed to speak the true tie, but still I must say that there is hardly a person present who would not have talked better about their poetry than they did themselves. That showed me in an instant that not by wisdom do poets write poetry, but by a sort of genius and inspiration. They are like diviners or soothsayers, who also say many fine things, but do not understand the meaning of them. And the poets appeared to me to be much in the same case, and I further observed that upon the strength of their poetry, they believed themselves to be the most sophos of men in other things in which they were not sophos. So I departed, conceiving myself to be superior to them for the same reason that I was superior to the politicians. At last I went to the artisans, for I was conscious that I knew nothing at all, as I may say, and I was sure that they knew many fine things, and in this I was not mistaken, for they did know many things of which I was ignorant, and in this they certainly were more sophos than I was. But I observed that even the good artisans fell into the same error as the poets. Because they were good workmen, they thought that they also knew all sorts of high matters, and this defect in them overshadowed their Sophia. Therefore, I asked myself on behalf of the oracle whether I would like to be as I was, neither having their knowledge nor their ignorance, or like them in both. And I made answer to myself and the oracle that I was better off as I was. This investigation has led to my having many enemies of the worst and most dangerous kind, and has given occasion also to many calumnies, and I am called Sophos, for my hearers always imagine that I myself possess the Sophia, which I find wanting in others. But the truth is, O men of Athens, that the god only is Sophos, and in this oracle he means to say that the Sophia of men is little or nothing. He is not speaking of Socrates, he is only using my name as an illustration, as if he said, He, O men, is the most Sophos, who, like Socrates, knows that his Sophia is in truth worth nothing. And so I go my way, obedient to the god, and make inquisition into the Sophia of anyone, whether citizen or stranger, who appears to be Sophos, and if he is not Sophos, then in vindication of the oracle, I show him that he is not wise. And this occupation quite absorbs me, and I have no time to give either to any public matter of interest or to any concern of my own, but I am in utter poverty by reason of my devotion to the god. There is another thing. Young men of the richer classes, who have not much to do, come about me of their own accord. They like to hear the pretenders examined, and they often imitate me and examine others themselves. There are plenty of persons, as they soon enough discover, who think that they know something, but really know little or nothing. And then those who are examined by them, instead of being angry with themselves, are angry with me. They say that Socrates is someone who is most polluted. He corrupts young men. And then if somebody asks them, why, what evil does he practice or teach? They do not know and cannot tell, but in order that they may not appear to be at a loss, they repeat the ready-made charges which are used against all philosophers about teaching things up in the clouds and under the earth, and having no gods, and making the worse appear the better cause. For they do not like to confess that their pretense of knowledge has been detected, which is the truth. And as they are numerous and ambitious and energetic, and are all in battle array and have persuasive tongues, they have filled your ears with their loud and inveterate calumnies. And this is the reason why my three accusers, Meletus and Anytus and Lycon, have set upon me. Meletus, who has a quarrel with me on behalf of the poets, Anytus on behalf of the craftsmen, Lycon on behalf of the rhetoricians, and as I said at the beginning, I cannot expect to get rid of this mass of calumny all in a moment. And this, O men of Athens, is the truth. I have concealed nothing, I have dissembled nothing, and yet I know that this plainness of speech makes them hate me, and what is their hatred but a proof that I am speaking the truth? This is the occasion and reason of their slander of me, as you will find out either in this or in any future inquiry. I have said enough in my defence against the first class of my accusers. I turn to the second class, who are headed by Meletus, that good and patriotic man as he calls himself, and now I will try to defend myself against them. These new accusers must also have their affidavit read. What do they say? Something of this sort, that Socrates commits wrong deeds and corrupts the young men, and he does not believe in the gods that the state believes in, but believes in other things having to do with daimonies of his own. That is the sort of charge. And now let us examine the particular counts. He says that I do no justice, but corrupt the youth. But I say, O men of Athens, that Meletus does no justice, and the evil is that he makes a joke of a serious matter, and is too ready at bringing other men to trial from a pretended zeal and interest about matters in which he really never had the smallest interest. And the truth of this I will endeavour to prove. Come here, Meletus, and let me ask a question of you. You think a great deal about the improvement of youth. Meletus: Yes, I do. Socrates: By the goddess Hera, that is good news. There are plenty of improvers then. And what do you say of the audience? Do they improve them? Meletus: Yes, they do. Socrates: And the counsellors? Meletus: Yes, the counsellors improve them. Socrates: But perhaps the members of the citizen assembly corrupt them, or do they too improve them? Meletus: They improve them. Socrates: Then every Athenian improves and elevates them, all with the exception of myself, and I alone am their corrupter. Is that what you affirm? Meletus: That is what I strongly affirm. Socrates: I am very unfortunate if that is true, but suppose I ask you a question. Would you say that this also holds true in the case of horses? Does one man do them harm and all the world good? Is not the exact opposite of this true? One man is able to do them good, or at least not many. The trainer of horses, that is to say, does them good, and others who have to do with them rather injure them. Is not that true, Meletus, of horses or any other animals? Yes, certainly. Whether you and Anytus say yes or no, that is no matter. Happy indeed would be the condition of youth if they had one corrupter only, and all the rest of the world were their improvers. And you, Meletus, have sufficiently shown that you never had a thought about the young. Your carelessness is seen in your not caring about matters spoken of in this very indictment. And now, Meletus, I must ask you another question. Which is better, to live among bad citizens or among good ones? Answer, friend, I say, for that is a question which may be easily answered. Do not the good do their neighbours good, and the bad do them evil? Meletus. Certainly. Socrates. And is there anyone who would rather be injured than benefited by those who live with him? Answer, my good friend. The law requires you to answer. Does anyone like to be injured? Meletus. Certainly not. Socrates. And when you accuse me of corrupting and deteriorating the youth, do you allege that I corrupt them intentionally or unintentionally? Meletus. Intentionally, I say. Socrates. But you have just admitted that the good do their neighbours good, and the evil do them evil. Now is that a truth which your superior wisdom has recognized thus early in life, and am I, at my age, in such darkness and ignorance as not to know that if a man with whom I have to live is corrupted by me, I am very likely to be harmed by him, and yet I corrupt him, and intentionally too. That is what you are saying, and of that you will never persuade me or any other human being. But either I do not corrupt them, or I corrupt them unintentionally, so that on either view of the case you lie. If my offence is unintentional, the law has no cognizance of unintentional offences. You ought to have taken me privately and warned and admonished me, for if I had been better advised, I should have left off doing what I only did unintentionally. No doubt I should. Whereas you hated to converse with me or teach me, but you indicted me in this court, where the law demands not instruction but punishment. I have shown, Athenians, as I was saying, that Meletus has no care at all, great or small, about the matter. But still I should like to know, Meletus, in what I am affirmed to corrupt the young. I suppose you mean, as I infer from your indictment, that I teach them not to acknowledge the gods which the state acknowledges, but some other new divinities or spiritual agencies in their stead. These are the lessons which corrupt the youth, as you say. Meletus. Yes, that I say emphatically. Socrates. Then, by the gods, Meletus, of whom we are speaking, tell me and the court in somewhat plainer terms what you mean. For I do not as yet understand whether you affirm that I teach others to acknowledge some gods, and therefore do believe in gods, and am not an entire atheist. This you do not lay to my charge, but only that they are not the same gods which the city recognizes. The charge is that they are different gods. Or do you mean to say that I am an atheist simply, and a teacher of atheism? Meletus. I mean the latter, that you are a complete atheist. Socrates. That is an extraordinary statement, Meletus. Why do you say that? Do you mean that I do not believe in the divinity of the sun or moon, which is the common creed of all men? Meletus. I assure you, judges, that he does not believe in them, for he says that the sun is stone and the moon earth. Socrates. Friend Meletus, you think that you are accusing Anaxagoras, and you have but a bad opinion of the judges, if you fancy them ignorant to such a degree as not to know that those doctrines are found in the books of Anaxagoras of Clazomenae, who is full of them. And these are the doctrines which the youth are said to learn of Socrates, when there are not infrequently exhibitions of them at the theatre, price of admission 1 drachma at the most, and they might cheaply purchase them, and laugh at Socrates if he pretends to father such eccentricities. And so, Meletus, you really think that I do not believe in any god? Meletus. I swear by Zeus that you believe absolutely in none at all. Socrates. You are a liar, Meletus, not believed even by yourself. For I cannot help thinking, O men of Athens, that Meletus is full of insolence and impudent, and that he has written this indictment in a spirit of mere wantonness and youthful bravado. Has he not compounded a riddle, thinking to try me? He said to himself, I shall see whether this Sophos Socrates will discover my ingenious contradiction, or whether I shall be able to deceive him and the rest of them. For he certainly does appear to me to contradict himself in the indictment, as much as if he said that Socrates is guilty of not believing in the gods, and yet of believing in them. But this surely is an exercise in playfulness. I should like you, O men of Athens, to join me in examining what I conceive to be his inconsistency. And do you, Meletus, answer. And I must remind you that you are not to interrupt me if I speak in my accustomed manner. Did ever man, Meletus, believe in the existence of human things and not of human beings? I wish, men of Athens, that he would answer, and not be always trying to get up an interruption. Did ever any man believe in horsemanship and not in horses, or in reed-playing and not in reed-players? No, my friend. I will answer to you and to the court as you refuse to answer for yourself. There is no man who ever did. But now please answer the next question. Can a man believe in things having to do with daimones and not in the daimons themselves? Meletus, he cannot. Socrates, I am glad that I have extracted that answer by the assistance of the court. Nevertheless, you swear in the indictment that I teach and believe in things related to daimones. Things new or old, no matter. At any rate, I believe in things related to daimones, as you say, and swear in the affidavit. But if I believe in things related to daimones, I must believe in daimones or gods themselves. Is not that true? Yes, that is true, for I may assume that your silence gives assent to that. Now what are daimones? Don't we think that they are either gods or the children of gods? Meletus. Yes, that is true. Socrates. But this is just the ingenious riddle of which I was speaking. The daimones are gods, and you say first that I do not believe in gods, and then again that I do believe in gods. That is, if I believe in daimones. For if the daimones are the illegitimate children of gods, whether by the nymphs or by any other mothers, as is thought, that, as all men will allow, necessarily implies the existence of their parents. You might as well affirm the existence of mules, and deny that of horses and asses. Such nonsense, Meletus, could only have been devised by you as a way to charge me. You have put this into the indictment because you had nothing real of which to accuse me. But no one who has a particle of understanding will ever be convinced by you that the same man can believe in things having to do with daimones and gods, and yet not believe that there are daimones themselves and gods and heroes. I have said enough in answer to the charge of Meletus. Any elaborate defence is unnecessary, but as I was saying before, I certainly have many enemies, and this is what will be my destruction if I am destroyed. Of that I am certain, not Meletus, nor yet Anytus, but the envy and detraction of the world, which has been the death of many good men, and will probably be the death of many more. There is no danger of my being the last of them. Perhaps someone might say, and are you not ashamed, Socrates, of pursuing such a goal in life, which is likely to cause you to die right now? To him I would reply, and I would be replying justly, you, my good man, are not saying it well, if you think it is necessary for a man to calculate the risks of living or dying. There is little use in doing that. Rather, he should only consider whether in doing anything he is doing things that are just or unjust, acting the part of a good man or of a bad one. Worthless men, Tract 28c according to your view, would be the demigods who fulfilled their lives by dying at Troy, especially the son of Thetis, who so despised the danger of risk, preferring it to waiting for disgrace. His mother, goddess that she was, had said to him, when he was showing his eagerness to slay Hector, something like this, I think. My child, if you avenge the slaying of your comrade Patroclus and kill Hector, you will die yourself. Right away your fate, she says, is ready for you after Hector. And he, hearing this, utterly despised danger and death, chastised 28, and instead of fearing them, feared rather to live like a worthless man and not to avenge his friend. Right away may I die next, he says, and impose justice on the one who committed injustice, rather than stay behind here by the curved ships, a laughingstock, and a heavy load for earth to bear. Do you think that he had any thought of death and danger? For wherever a man's place is, whether the place which he has chosen or that in which he has been placed by a commander, there he ought to remain in the hour of danger. He should not think of death or of anything, but of disgrace. And this, O men of Athens, is a true saying. Strange indeed would be my conduct, O men of Athens, if I who, when I was ordered by the generals, whom you chose to command me at Potidea and Amphipolis and Delium, remained where they placed me like any other man, facing death. If, I say, now, when, as I conceive and imagine, the god orders me to fulfill the philosopher's mission of searching into myself and other men, I were to desert my post through fear of death, or any other fear. That would indeed be strange, and I might justly be arraigned in court for denying the existence of the gods. If I disobeyed the oracle because I was afraid of death, then I should be fancying that I was Sophos, when I was not Sophos. For this fear of death is indeed the pretence of Sophia, and not real Sophia, being the appearance of knowing the unknown, since no one knows whether death, which they in their fear apprehend to be the greatest evil, may not be the greatest good. Is there not here conceit of knowledge, which is a disgraceful sort of ignorance? And this is the point in which, as I think I am superior to men in general, and in which I might perhaps fancy myself more Sophos than other men, that whereas I know but little of the world below, I do not suppose that I know. But I do know that injustice and disobedience to a better, whether God or man, is evil and dishonourable, and I will never fear or avoid a possible good rather than a certain evil. And therefore, if you let me go now and reject the counsels of Meletus, who said that if I were not put to death, I ought not to have been prosecuted, and that if I escape now, your sons will all be utterly ruined by listening to my words, if you say to me, Socrates, this time we will not mind Anytus, and will let you off, but upon one condition, that are to inquire and speculate in this way any more, and that if you are caught doing this again, you shall die. If this was the condition on which you let me go, I should reply, Men of Athens, I honour and love you, but I shall obey the god rather than you. And while I have life and strength, I shall never cease from the practice and teaching of philosophy, exhorting anyone whom I meet after my manner, and convincing him, saying, O my friend, why do you, who are a citizen of the great and mighty and Sophos polis of Athens, care so much about laying up the greatest amount of money and honour and reputation, and so little about Sophia and truth and the greatest improvement of the soul, which you never regard or heed at all? Are you not ashamed of this? And if the person with whom I am arguing says, Yes, but I do care, I do not depart or let him go at once. I interrogate and examine and cross-examine him, and if I think that he has no virtue, but only says that he has, I reproach him with undervaluing the greater and overvaluing the less. And this I should say to everyone whom I meet, young and old, citizen and alien, but especially to the citizens, inasmuch as they are my brethren. For this is the command of the god, as I would have you know, and I believe that to this day no greater good has ever happened in the state than my service to the god. For I do nothing but go about persuading you all, old and young alike, not to take thought for your persons and your properties, but first and chiefly to care about the greatest improvement of the soul. I tell you that virtue is not given by money, but that from virtue come money and every other good of man, public as well as private. This is my teaching, and if this is the doctrine which corrupts the youth, my influence is ruinous indeed. But if anyone says that this is not my teaching, he is speaking an untruth. Wherefore, O men of Athens, I say to you, do as Anytus bids or not as Anytus bids, and either acquit me or not, but whatever you do, know that I shall never alter my ways, not even if I have to die many times. Men of Athens, do not interrupt, but hear me. There was an agreement between us that you should hear me out. And I think that what I am going to say will do you good, for I have something more to say, at which you may be inclined to cry out. But I beg that you will not do this. I would have you know that if you kill such a one as I am, you will injure yourselves more than you will injure me. Meletus and Anytus will not injure me. They cannot, for it is not in the nature of things that a bad man should injure a better than himself. I do not deny that he may perhaps kill him, or drive him into exile, or deprive him of civil rights. And he may imagine, and others may imagine, that he is doing him a great injury. But in that I do not agree with him, for the evil of doing as Anytus is doing, of unjustly taking away another man's life, is greater far. And now, Athenians, I am not going to argue for my own sake, as you may think, but for yours, that you may not sin against the god or lightly reject his boon by condemning me. For if you kill me, you will not easily find another like me, who, if I may use such a ludicrous figure of speech, am a sort of gadfly, given to the state by the god. And the state is like a great and noble steed, who is tardy in his motions, owing to his very size, and requires to be stirred into life. I am that gadfly which the god has given the state, and all day long and in all places am always fastening upon you, arousing and persuading and reproaching you. And as you will not easily find another like me, I would advise you to spare me. I dare say that you may feel irritated at being suddenly awakened when you are caught napping, and you may think that if you were to strike me dead, as Anytus advises, which you easily might, then you would sleep on for the remainder of your lives, unless the God in his care of you gives you another gadfly. And that I am given to you by the God is proved by this, that if I had been like other men, I should not have neglected all my own concerns, or patiently seen the neglect of them during all these years, and have been doing yours, coming to you individually, like a father or elder brother, exhorting you to regard virtue. This, I say, would not be like human nature. And had I gained anything, or if my exhortations had been paid, there would have been some sense in that. But now, as you will perceive, not even the impudence of my accusers dares to say that I have ever exacted or sought pay of anyone. They have no witness of that. And I have a witness of the truth of what I say. My poverty is a sufficient witness. Someone may wonder why I go about in private, giving advice and busying myself with the concerns of others, but do not venture to come forward in public and advise the state. I will tell you the reason for this. You have often heard me speak of something related to the gods and to the daimons, a voice which comes to me and is the thing that Meletus ridicules in the indictment. This thing I have had ever since I was a child. It is a voice which comes to me and always forbids me to do something which I am going to do, but never commands me to do anything. And this is what stands in the way of being engaged in matters of the state. And rightly, as I think. For I am certain, O men of Athens, that if I had engaged in these matters, I would have perished long ago, and done no good either to you or to myself. And do not be offended at my telling you the truth, for the truth is that no man who goes to war with you or any other multitude, honestly struggling against the commission of unrighteousness and wrong in the state, will save his life. He who will really fight for the right, if he would be safe even for a little while, must have a private life and not a public one. I can give you as proofs of this, not words only, but deeds, which you value more than words. Let me tell you a passage of my own life, which will prove to you that I should never have yielded to injustice from any fear of death, and that if I had not yielded I should have died at once. I will tell you a story, tasteless perhaps and commonplace, but nevertheless true. The only office of state which I ever held, O men of Athens, was that of counsellor. The tribe Antiochus, which is my tribe, had the presidency at the trial of the generals who had not taken up the bodies of the slain after the battle of Arginusae, and you proposed to try them all together, which was illegal, as you all thought afterwards. But at the time I was the only one of the Prytaneas who was opposed to the illegality, and I gave my vote against you. And when the orators threatened to impeach and arrest me and have me taken away, and you called and shouted, I made up my mind that I would run the risk, having law and justice with me, rather than take part in your injustice because I feared imprisonment and death. This happened in the days of the democracy. But when the oligarchy of the 30 was in power, they sent for me and 4 others into the rotunda, and bade us bring Leon of Salamis, as they wanted to execute him. This was a specimen of the sort of commands which they were always giving with the view of implicating as many as possible in their crimes. And then I showed, not in words only but in deed, that if I may be allowed to use such an expression, I cared not a straw for death, and that my only fear was the fear of doing an unrighteous or unholy thing. For the strong arm of that oppressive power did not frighten me into doing wrong. And when we came out of the rotunda, the other 4 went to Salamis and fetched Leon, but I went quietly home, for which I might have lost my life, had not the power of the 30 shortly afterwards come to an end. And to this many will witness. Now, do you really imagine that I could have survived all these years if I had led a public life, supposing that like a good man I had always supported the right and had made justice, as I ought, the first thing? No, indeed, men of Athens, neither I nor any other. But I have been always the same in all my actions, public as well as private, and never have I yielded any base compliance to those who are slanderously termed my disciples, or to any other. For the truth is that I have no regular disciples, but if anyone likes to come and hear me while I am pursuing my mission, whether he be young or old, he may freely come. Nor do I converse with those who pay only, and not with those who do not pay, but anyone, whether he be rich or poor, may ask and answer me and listen to my words, and whether he turns out to be a bad man or a good one, that cannot be my responsibility, as I never taught him anything. And if anyone says that he has ever learned or heard anything from me in private which all the world has not heard, I should like you to know that he is speaking an untruth. But I shall be asked, why do people delight in continually conversing with you? I have told you already, Athenians, the whole truth about this. They like to hear the cross-examination of the pretenders to wisdom. There is amusement in this. And this is a duty which the god has imposed upon me, as I am assured by oracles, visions, and in every sort of way in which the will of divine power was ever signified to anyone. This is true, O Athenians, or if not true, would be soon refuted. For if I am really corrupting the youth, and have corrupted some of them already, those of them who have grown up and have become sensible that I gave them bad advice in the days of their youth should come forward as accusers and take their revenge. And if they do not like to come themselves, some of their relatives, fathers, brothers, or other kinsmen should say what evil their families suffered at my hands. Now is their time. Many of them I see in the court. There is Crito, who is of the same age and of the same deme with myself, and there is Critobulus, his son, whom I also see. Then again, there is Lysanias of Sphetos, who is the father of Aeschines. He is present. And also there is Antiphon of Cephisus, who is the father of Epigenes, and there are the brothers of several who have associated with me. There is Nicostratus, the son of Theodotides, and the brother of Theodotus. Now Theodotus himself is dead, and therefore he, at any rate, will not seek to stop him. And there is Paralus, the son of Demodocus, who had a brother Theages, and Adimantus, the son of Ariston, whose brother Plato is present, and Aeantodorus, who is the brother of Apollodorus, whom I also see. I might mention a great many others, any of whom Meletus should have produced as witnesses in the course of his speech, and let him still produce them. If he has forgotten, I will make way for him. And let him say if he has any testimony of the sort that he can produce. Nay, Athenians, the very opposite is the truth. For all these are ready to witness on behalf of the corrupter, of the destroyer of their kindred, as Meletus and Anytus call me, not the corrupted youth only, there might have been a motive for that, but their uncorrupted elder relatives. Why should they too support me with their testimony? Why indeed, except for the sake of truth and justice, and because they know that I am speaking the truth, and that Meletus is lying? Well, Athenians, this and the like of this is nearly all the defence that I have to offer. Yet a word more. Perhaps there may be someone who is offended at me, when he calls to mind how he himself, on a similar or even a less serious occasion, had recourse to prayers and supplications with many tears, and how he produced his children in court, which was a moving spectacle, together with a posse of his relations and friends, whereas I, who am probably in danger of my life, will do none of these things. Perhaps this may come into his mind, and he may be set against me, and vote in anger because he is displeased at this. Now, if there be such a person among you, which I am far from affirming, I may fairly reply to him, My friend, I am a man, and like other men, a creature of flesh and blood, and not of wood or stone, as Homer says, and I have a family, yes, and sons. O Athenians, 3 in number, one of whom is growing up, and the 2 others are still young. And yet I will not bring any of them hither in order to petition you for an acquittal. And why not? Not from any self-will or disregard of you. Whether I am or am not afraid of death is another question, of which I will not now speak. But my reason simply is that I feel such conduct to be discreditable to myself, and you, and the whole state. One who has reached my years, and who has a name for wisdom, whether deserved or not, ought not to debase himself. At any rate, the world has decided that Socrates is in some way superior to other men. And if those among you who are said to be superior in wisdom and courage and any other virtue demean themselves in this way, how shameful is their conduct! I have seen men of reputation, when they have been condemned, behaving in the strangest manner. They seemed to fancy that they were going to suffer something dreadful if they died, and that they could be immortal if you only allowed them to live. And I think that they were a dishonour to the state, and that any stranger coming in would say of them that the most eminent men of Athens, to whom the Athenians themselves give honour and command, are no better than women. And I say that these things ought not to be done by those of us who are of reputation, and if they are done, you ought not to permit them. You ought rather to show that you are more inclined to condemn, not the man who is quiet, but the man who gets up a doleful scene and makes the city ridiculous. But, setting aside the question of dishonour, there seems to be something wrong in petitioning a judge, and thus procuring an acquittal instead of informing and convincing him. For his duty is not to make a present of justice, but to give judgment. And he has sworn that he will judge according to the laws and not according to his own good pleasure. And neither he nor we should get into the habit of perjuring ourselves. There can be no piety in that. Do not then require me to do what I consider dishonourable and impious and wrong, especially now, when I am being tried for impiety on the indictment of Meletus. For if, O men of Athens, by force of persuasion and entreaty, I could overpower your oaths, then I should be teaching you to believe that there are no gods, and convict myself, in my own defence, of not believing in them. But that is not the case. For I do believe that there are gods, and in a far higher sense than that in which any of my accusers believe in them. And to you, and to the God, I commit my cause, to be determined by you as is best for you and me. Thank you for bearing with me this long. Hopefully, you've subscribed to my channel, but if not, you still can. Don't forget to check out more videos on the channel as well. Should you feel inspired to read book and add it to your collection, there is a link in the description to purchase it at a discount.